The Curse of Maplewood. Maplewood wasn't a town you'd find in any travel guide. Nestled between dense forests and winding rivers, it was a quiet place where everyone knew everyone else's business, but few outsiders ever passed through. The locals liked it that way. The town's oldest legend was a cautionary tale passed down through generations. It was the story of Sarah Granger, a woman who was said to have made a dark pact with an entity known only as the Whispering One many years ago. The pact was sealed with blood, and the curse it carried would haunt Maplewood forever. The arrival. It wasn't until 1996, when Julia Turner, a young journalist from the city, found herself passing through Maplewood, that the legend of Sarah Granger would be reawakened. She had been researching local folklore for a piece on the supernatural and had come across the story of the cursed town. Intrigued, Julia set out to interview the locals. When she first arrived, the town looked picturesque. Old brick houses, towering oaks lining the main road, and small shops that had seen better days. But the moment she stepped out of her car, something felt off. A heaviness in the air, like a storm was brewing, but there were no clouds in the sky. The few people walking the streets seemed to move slowly, their eyes avoiding hers as if they were afraid of being seen. Julia went to the town's only diner to grab some coffee and hopefully start gathering stories. The bell above the door jingled when she entered, and the waitress, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes, greeted her with a forced smile. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked, her voice sounding a little too sweet. "I'm Julia. I'm here to write a piece on the local folklore. I'm interested in hearing about the legend of Sarah Granger," Julia said, her voice friendly but curious. At the mention of the name, the waitress's smile faltered. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. A couple of locals at a nearby table stopped talking and turned their heads toward her. The waitress cleared her throat. "You should leave," she said in a low tone, almost a whisper. "The Granger story, it's not for outsiders." Julia raised an eyebrow, sensing the tension. "I'm here to get the facts, not to judge. What happened to her?" The waitress leaned in closer, her voice shaking slightly. "It's not a story you want to hear. People who dig too deep, they never leave the same. If you value your life, I suggest you leave Maplewood tonight and never look back." The curse unfolds. Julia was unnerved but determined. After paying for her coffee, she thanked the waitress and left the diner. She knew there was something the townspeople weren't telling her, and she couldn't walk away now. Her curiosity had always been her driving force, and this was no different. The next few days were a blur. Julia tried to talk to more locals, but the response was always the same: cold, dismissive, or downright frightened. It wasn't until an old man named Caleb Walker, a former historian of the town, took pity on her that she learned the truth. Caleb met her at the town's small cemetery, the gravestones cracked and overgrown with ivy. He had been one of the few people willing to speak with her, and his eyes were full of sorrow when he spoke. "Sarah Granger, she was a woman of beauty and intelligence," Caleb began, his voice thick with emotion. "But she wasn't like the rest of us. She believed in the old ways and magic and spirits. It wasn't enough for her to follow the laws of nature. She wanted more." He told Julia the legend of Sarah's pact. Sarah, desperate to save her dying husband, had gone to the forest at midnight one winter's eve. There, she met a figure cloaked in shadows, a creature who offered her a deal. In exchange for her soul, the creature would heal her husband and grant her power beyond measure. Sarah, consumed by grief and desperation, agreed. But the creature's power was not a blessing, it was a curse. That very night, her husband died, and the town began to experience strange occurrences. Children would go missing, crops failed, and the once thriving community began to wither. But Sarah's fate was far worse. The curse that she had bound herself to started to warp her body and mind. Every year, as the anniversary of her pact drew near, the town would experience the full force of the curse. One person would vanish, swallowed by the town itself. This would continue generation after generation until the pact was broken. But no one knew how. The disappearance. Julia didn't want to believe Caleb's story, but the pieces started falling into place. Strange things started happening to her too. She began having vivid dreams of a shadowy figure following her, and she would hear whispers in the dark, calling her name. On the night of the anniversary of Sarah Granger's pact, Julia made one final decision. She would confront the curse head-on. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, she ventured into the woods at the outskirts of town, where Sarah had made her pact all those years ago. The air was thick with fog, and the trees loomed like dark sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. Julia's heart pounded in her chest as she walked deeper into the forest. As she reached a clearing, she saw it, a stone altar worn by centuries of use, with symbols carved into it that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The whispers were louder now, surrounding her, pulling her toward the altar. Suddenly, a shadow moved from the corner of her eye. Julia turned, but there was nothing there. She could feel her breath quicken, her body frozen in place. A cold wind swept through the trees, and in the distance she saw a figure, tall and cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing like embers. Julia turned to run, but it was too late. The whispers grew louder, surrounding her like a suffocating fog. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was the shadow reaching out toward her. The aftermath. The next morning, Julia's car was found abandoned at the edge of Maplewood's woods. Her camera was missing, and there was no sign of her anywhere. The townspeople, now even more fearful than before, began to whisper the name Sarah Granger once again. Maplewood's curse had claimed another victim. And as the years went by, the story of Julia Turner would fade, just like all the others before her. Maplewood's dark secret would live on, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. And the whispers, they never stopped.